早晨各位，
Good morning, colleagues. We have a quorum, and it is also the scheduled time. Welcome to the PWSC morning meeting. Agenda item number 1. We have a late application, and agenda number 1 is to consider legislator Mr. Hui Jifeng's application. His application letter has been sent to the is document PWSC 4/1819, and it has been delivered on 16th of October. And according to the rules of procedure, paragraph 4B, with the chairman's approval, a late application because of illness or because of business outside of Hong Kong, these applications can be made, and when they return to Hong Kong or when they have recovered, and the subcommittee can deliberate the application and decide whether to accept the application. Mr. Hui is not present, but his letter indicated that he would like to make a late application and had provided reasons. So how do you wish to proceed on this application? No objection? Okay. So, do we accept his application? Mr. Jia Wai-chun. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I want to understand what his reasons are. Chairman said he provided reasons, so could you give us some details? Well, the letter says, you can see it says the LegCo PWSC will deliberate on expenditure, and these are matters of society's concern, and I would like to participate in the activities. Yes, I understand, Chairman. You had said that when he made an application for the PWSC membership, why did he not apply? Was he out of Hong Kong? And I'd also like to ask, when there are applications to subcommittees, the applicants, are they allowed to make a presentation? Well, I think if he was present, he could make an explanation, and but since he's not present, if you have questions regarding his application, or his reasons for application, and why did he not apply before the deadline, if you want him to respond, well, then we might have to postpone this item because he is not present. Well, I think we need to be fair. If members have questions for Mr. Chair did not object, so I think it would be better if he were present. Ms. Tanya Chan, I just want to understand, because I recall on the last session there was a similar scenario, and the applicant, the legislator, was present to explain his application. Well, we could postpone this agenda item, and Ms. Tanya Chan. Well, Chairman, if I recall, your rules of procedure guideline says there are 2 reasons for late applications, and that's almost a de facto reason, and if there are other reasons, then it needs our approval. So we should deliberate as soon as possible. We should not postpone. And if you have any views, of course, with Mr. Hui Jifeng not being present, it's hard to discuss. But the reasons are already given in the letter, and in the past we had late applications, and sometimes even when the deputy chairman were not present, we could still vote. Well, why do we need to deliberate to postpone? Well, Mr. Jia Wai-chun raised the question that Mr. Hui Jifeng's letter did not explain why he was late, and why did he not make an application before the deadline. Well, aside from the 2 reasons we need an approval, well, we already have a quorum. Why can't we vote on it? Well, there's a third way out, whether we vote here or endorse it. or whether Chairman invite Mr. Hui Jifeng to provide an explanation to Mr. Jie Waichun's question. That is something we could also consider. Well, I think Mr. Jie Waichun has raised a question. He did not object, but he would like Mr. Hui Jifeng to respond. So one way is to postpone this item, and the next we can return to this. Well, that was a rule of procedure issue. We are dealing with an application. Now, if the rules of procedure are clear, it says that there are two reasons that when these conditions are met, we can approve the application, and we can deliberate if there are other reasons. So this is a rule of procedure. So do we have to wait till he returns, or the next occasion? Do we also have to meet to Mr. Jie Waichun's requirement? He has to make another application. He has to provide reasons for his late application to the PWSC. So what is the purpose of postponing the item? I support, Chairman, how you deal with it, but I think if you accept Mr. Jie Waichun's postponement, and if we also have Mr. Fan Guowai's suggestion of providing supplemental reasons, we can deal with all that. Well, I need to ask members now how we should proceed with Mr. Hui Jifeng's application. So now we have a suggestion that they would like Mr. Hui Jifeng to answer questions. Mr. Tan Waichun. Well, I have two reasons, Chairman, regarding the applicant, Mr. Hui. If he has sufficient reasons, and if we were to deny him an opportunity to explain, it would not be fair. And if Mr. Hui is so concerned about PWSC, well, I think he's back in Hong Kong. It's just he's not sure whether he can attend the meeting. So my request was just that to be fair to all the applicants. I think Mr. Jie Waichun had made an appropriate suggestion. He's giving Mr. Hui an opportunity to explain himself. So I will postpone this item. So if colleagues are in contact with Mr. Hui or the secretary can confirm he is present. Mr. Wu Jiwei. Well, Chairman, after we resumed this session, we have had colleagues joining after the deadline, and we respect members' wishes to participate in panels and subcommittees. Unless there is strong reasons, I think we should allow legislators to join the panels and subcommittees. And so if other meetings can allow for these arrangements, then, Chairman, I understand you have discretion, but I hope that if legislators are interested in joining, they should be given an opportunity to participate in the discussions. So there should not be unnecessary postponement. So I hope, Chairman, you could deal with this immediately. Well, I already gave my ruling. I think it's fair because we do have members present to have Mr. Hui explain why he had a late application. And I think we should have time to deal with that when he returns. And we can deal with his application. Mr. Chan Hangban, do you wish to speak on this issue? Well, Chairman, I'd like to say in the past we had late applications, and when we asked the late applicants, they had to go through some questions. I recall Mr. Zhang Wafeng, in their Q&A session, he had to respond to questions. And of course, we're not doing that today, but I think the precedent was started by them, and we're just complying with the practice. So, chairman's ruling is appropriate. Let's follow the precedent. So, let's postpone this item. Mr. Tan Jixun, I want to come back to the practical matters. So whether we have late applications to subcommittees or whatever, they have to make a written application. Sometimes they will attend without late applicants will attend without approval, and there are questions being raised, and they can choose to attend to respond to questions or not respond. So even if they don't attend, it will still be dealt with by a vote. And of course, if members who wish to raise questions and if they express that interest at an early stage, and that would also be an expedient measure. So what I want to say is that even if the applicant is not present or he does not wish to respond to questions, we can still deal with it by way of a vote. I agree with Mr. Tan Ji-chun.
I agree with Mr. Tan Ji-chun, but we can try to contact Mr. Hui to see if he can be present to address members' questions. And maybe we would need to vote after he has answered the questions. Well, since a member has raised concerns, I think that we should deal with this item later on. Mr. Tian. Thank you, Chairman. Well, must Mr. Hui attend this meeting? Well, no, it's not essential. Well, I want to ask the Secretary if there is a rule that we must decide on the matter immediately. Can the chairman decide to handle it at a later stage? Well, the Secretary has stated that there is no rule. Well, just make a decision, Chairman. Well, I've already made my decision, so I do not want to argue about this anymore. Let's move on to the next agenda item. There are two papers for discussion today. And these are new proposals, and this is a total of 3.9145 billion. I remind members that if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest in today's items, in accordance with 83A of the Rules of Procedure, please disclose interest before discussion. I also remind members to take note of Rules of Procedure 84. Item 702CL. This is paper PWSC bracket 2 OIT 1929. This paper proposes to upgrade part of 702CL to Category A at an estimated cost of 2,874.4 million in money of the day prices. The government has already proposed this on June 26 at the panel on development. And today we have with us Mr. Victor Chan, Principal Assistant Secretary for Development, Mr. Wallace Tang, Assistant Secretary for Development, Mr. Michael Leung, Project Manager of CEDD, Mr. Peter Choi, Chief Engineer of East Development Office of CEDD, and Mr. George Mack, Chief Engineer of East Development Office CEDD. Members may now ask questions. Mr. Gary Fan. Thank you. I would like to ask about paragraph 3, bracket A, that the construction would include a landscape decks of about 380 meters long in total, with a minimum width of about 11 meters above road D3, and landscaped area adjoining road D3 providing total of about 3.9 hectares of public open space. And in paragraph 9, it said that there should be enjoyment of the public open space, and then this would be about cost about 390 million. So that's around 13.7% of the entire expenditure. I want to ask about this area of less than 4 hectares. Why do you need to use around almost 400 million for this landscape deck? Who would like to address this question? Thank you, Chairman. This is a total of about 3.9 hectares of public open space. There would be a landscape deck and also elevators leading to it. The landscape deck is a bit elevated so that the public can enjoy the landscape on this observation deck. The cost is similar to regular public spaces. Thank you. Any follow-up question? So when you were considering this, have you considered other options to try to lower the cost? Is this the only viable design? Mr. Mack? Thank you, Chairman. The design of the promenade is relatively simple. In future, it would be part of the future Metro Park in Kai Tak. We're not putting in complicated structures. We're only putting in stairs leading to the decks and putting in some sort of greenery. There would also be a green corridor for pedestrians and cyclists. We would also put in public changing rooms. This is not a complicated design, nor is it a luxurious design. The construction cost is similar to other public spaces. It's not especially expensive. Well, you haven't answered my question. I'm just concerned about the total cost. Well, you're only elaborating on your design. Can you pick another option that is relatively cheaper? Mr. Mack, thank you. We have consulted the Harbourfront Commission and the district councils in the area on the design, and this is the design supported by everyone. Thank you. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, 4 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. I have a few questions. First of all, in relation to the landscaped deck, I see that there's actually a gap between the adjoining road to the Metro Park. Is it because you need to install a ventilation for the underpass in that gap? And in the Kai Tak development, we see there are quite a few underpasses. I have argued on different occasions that these underpasses could be considered for cyclist use. But what I have heard so far is that there are bicycle lanes but the underpass is not open for cyclists. I want to say that cyclists would like to see both areas for cyclists, and they would also like to have roads for commuter use. In a new development area, you can actually consider laying out a better route for cyclists. Have you considered this in the overall design, that in future the underpass can also be open for cyclists? My understanding of the landscape deck is sort of like the Timar Park outside our building. It is actually quite a windy area. Have you considered what kind of trees you are going to plant to ensure that they could grow in a healthy manner? Otherwise, when there are strong gales, the trees would fall. Mr. Leung, thank you. Let me address the concerns on bicycles and trees. Mr. Wu is correct. We have heard voices hoping to see more bicycle lanes. We do have a bicycle lane within the design. The cyclist lane on road D3 is right along the promenade and not at the underpass. I'm sorry, Chairman. I understand that yes, the bicycle lane would be available within the park, but I'm talking about a commuter lane. Maybe the cyclists could also use the underpass as well. Mr. Leung, we have considered traffic safety. Well, this is a new development area. The roads are very wide. If you can design with this in mind, then cars and cyclists can both use the roads. Please allow Mr. Leung to answer. Thank you, Chairman. We have considered the use of the roads by cars, pedestrians, and cyclists. And we have decided to put the bicycle lane and pedestrian walkway right next to the promenade. We have also considered the issue of wind and gale in our tree planting decision. And we can put in some small leaf trees so that they could withstand strong winds, much like the typhoon Mangkhut that we have just experienced. Well, I can try to answer about the gap next to road D3. Well, yes, Mr. Wu is correct. This would be used for ventilation for the underpass. Mr. Tony, 4 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. I support this item in principle. Members of the public hope to see this development because the Kai Tak development has been delayed for a very long time. Transportation arrangements is not very comprehensive. Therefore, when there are no cruises at port, the cruise terminal is very empty and quiet. This item will cost around 2,874 million, and there would be elevated roads and pedestrian walkways. I would like to ask about the elevated roads and flyovers. Well, sometimes when we build bridges, we can also consider at the same time how to use the space underneath the bridge or the elevated roads. Have you considered how you can better utilize the empty space? In the past, when we talked about a Kai Tak development and Kowloon East, we did discuss environmentally friendly transport. I think we did talk about a monorail before. Well, we are now beginning construction in the Kai Tak area. In the future, what if we decide not to build a monorail? Would all the construction in this item be able to support the transportation? Have you considered the options?
主席，
The first question regarding the D3 route, that is a bridge, and under the bridge, that will be part of the future open space, and we've set aside some space for use, but it's not confirmed. You have not determined how it will be used. It will depend. It allows for flexibility. It could, if it will be part of the open space, the users can consider an application for use. The second question about the environmental connection, the CEDD is going through the detailed feasibility study, and we foresee it will be completed by the end of the year. And in our outline zoning plan, we have set aside space for the environmental connection, and it will not conflict with the road works. Well, what if they decide not to build? Will there be a waste? Mr. Chan? As we said just now, the environmental link, when we conclude the detailed feasibility study, the government will consider the results and consider the development plan and how to proceed. Mr. Chan Ji-chun. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, the paper in front of us amounts to 2.8 billion. It will be spent on road works, more than 1.3 billion. But the public open space, as Mr. Gary Fan said, amounts to 400 million. But the paper seems to lack substance. For example, the public open space, the Outlook platform, we don't even have artist impression. Has it appeared before? The first question is in enclosure 1, page 2. We have a cross-section diagram, an artist's impression. Is that the cross-section diagram of the platform, the viewing platform? Mr. Leung? Well, regarding the cross-section diagram, you are referring to sheet 2 of 3 in enclosure 1. That is not the platform. I can tell you we have some viewing platform, we have a water activity area, we also have a platform. So if you want the 3D diagram, we have submitted that to the district council, and we have their support. So if Chairman allows, we can provide that after the meeting. Well, of course, I want those diagrams if you have submitted them to the District Council, because there was a question just now whether this platform is necessary. I don't see the artist's impression. I'm just looking at the cross-section diagram. It just says we have a blue diagonal line and the cross-section diagram. Where is it referring to? We have some questions. So we have a pedestrian access way. Why do we need to have a pedestrian walkway above ground level, and how much money is spent on that? And on sheet 2 or 3, the blue line, it says, it indicates a 380 meter long section, and we also have an underpass. How does that connect to the carriageway? Mr. Leung? Well, this connects to D3, and in order to facilitate your understanding, we can submit the cross-section diagrams to you after the meeting. Well, I'd like you to explain the section artist impression. What is that, Mr. Leung? The section BB, that is the underpass, and that is the part that connects to D3. I don't quite grasp where the location is. We can submit the information after the meeting. Well, that means I can only ask you on the next occasion. Okay. Mr. Lok Jong Hong. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I feel having a viewing platform is quite innovative. It's quite a new idea. But so the function, is it recreation space, or what kind of facilities are we going to have there? We have vehicles underneath, and there's vehicle emissions. So would that be suitable for tourists or for recreational activities? Will people be interested? Do we have a lot of open space? How will you attract people to use that platform? What kind of designs do you have in mind? How, if it's above ground, how will they connect to the ground level? Mr. Mack? Thank you, Chairman. This above ground platform, it's part of the public open space in Kai Tak. We have a 300 hectare development, and 100 hectares are public open space. So just now I had dealt with that. The elevated platform on the left, we connect to the ground level. So it is at level, and at the bottom we have Metropolis, a future Metro Park, and it can connect to the promenade, so there won't be a disconnection. The viewing platform, towards the right, it will elevate, and the purpose is the elevated platform. You see there is a roundabout, and we are building from the roundabout all the way to the cruise terminal, and the platform will be completed by next year. So when we connect this elevated section, so pedestrians can go from the Metro Park, and it connects all of the runway towards the south. So aside from vegetation, it is a whole comprehensive pedestrian system. So I want to confirm, aside from recreation, it is also a pedestrian walkway, and we have connections on both ends. That is correct, Chairman. Next, Mr. Ho Kai-ming. We'd like to see the infrastructure at the old airport developed as soon as possible. So we know that even if you drive, it's very cumbersome to access the cruise terminal. So with the new infrastructure, it makes it easier. From Togawan, you can access the cruise terminal and the Kai Tak Hospital and the Children's Hospital. The connection now is very roundabout, so we need the infrastructure to be built as soon as possible. But there are some two details I'd like the government to consider. In the vicinity, from let's say from Guntong, Kowloon City, Yaojinwang, they can connect to this very quickly, with the exception of Wangdaixin. It's very hard to access this location. There is no direct route to go to the Kai Tak Hospital or the Children's Hospital, but the hospital cluster will be serving Wangdaixin. So how can we make it more convenient for Wangdaixin residents to use this cluster? Of course, we need to overcome technical issues, but more simply, at the roundabout, can we have more facilities? Can we have left turn exits allowing access, so the residents can use the cluster more easily? There is, first of all, there's a wall blocking off Wangdaixin and the Kai Tak area. I don't understand why. And in the petrol station outside of Mega Box, there are some minor works in the major works. And if we could have a turning area, that will allow buses to turn. Then buses could stop at the hospital. We had discussed the location. If it could be opposite the Mega Box near the petrol station, it would facilitate residents using the Kai Tak Hospital and the Children's Hospital. It will be serving the whole territory. It would be beneficial to residents. So I'd like the government to consider these issues. Overall, we support the project. We support the infrastructure. Who could respond to Mr. Ho Kai-ming's questions? Mr. Choi. Regarding Wangdaixin residents using the Children's Hospital, currently motorists can take Sengip Street, Changseng Street to use the A&E. We already have works. We will convert a single lane road and convert it to dual carriageway. It will be widened, and given our proposal today, in the D3 section, we will provide another road from the northern landing strip. It will connect to the south, and that will also facilitate traffic. Regarding the Children's Hospital, when it will come into operation, the hospital authority and other government departments are committing their resources to create a better traffic system. In our current proposal, We have some regional roads, L16, L18. These will connect to the future A&E hospital, and we will have ingress and egress locations. Chairman, actually, I have another response regarding the megabox filling station. Now, we've taken a look at it, and if we allocate a bus stop near the filling station, we have considered, after they turn to S20, legislators and the public have discussed that if they turn into S20, this is one of the minor works that is being applied for. We can create a bus stop there. First of all, it can avoid the Kai Fok Road traffic jam. It could also provide convenience to the southern landing strip or the hospital. So when will these be confirmed? I think we'll have to wait till the development. We have to wait for the Children's Hospital and the A&E Hospital development, and before we can have further confirmation. Mr. Au Lok Him.
Oh, just now I have heard the administration respond to Mr. Jae Wei Chun's question. I'm not quite clear. Why would you say that there would not be any conflict between the constructions? And secondly, what if you decide to shelve the environmentally friendly monorail and you decide to review it at a later stage? Then how are you going to go ahead with the construction? Thank you for your question. First of all, the environmentally friendly access in the outline zoning plan, we have already reserved space for that. So we do have that space. The roads within the Kai Tak area have also been outlined clearly in the zoning plan. Therefore, there would not be any conflict between plans and designs in the area. Well, you have the environmentally friendly access and the monorail. Well, these are two different things. Well, we are talking about the environmentally friendly access. We could consider different formats. Right now, we are working on a feasibility plan, and we think that it could be built in an elevated manner, but we are not sure whether it would be an environmentally friendly design. So that would be subject to further discussion and research. The second question, as I have said, we are still undergoing research, and once we have confirmed the feasibility, then we will look into following up with implementation. Oh, I have another question. Well, you still have time. In paragraph 3A, bracket 5, it is mentioned that there will be a 3.9 hectares of public open space built. Well, 3.9 hectares is not small. If you look back at other development plans in the Northern District, you have 0.87 hectares of land would already be enough for a children's playground, a jogging track, a changing room, a Tai Chi area, and so on and so forth. It is mentioned that there would be different facilities on the landscape deck. Can you let us know what facilities would be built on the decks? If you still do not have any plans yet. Would you consider putting in community facilities? And can you please elaborate on that? Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think I touched on it briefly, what facilities would be made available. Let me go through it again. There would be a co-sharing lane called the Green Corridor for both pedestrians and cyclists. So this will be part of the 13 kilometers of the Kai Tak cycling lane. And you can walk along the promenade to the landscape deck. It would be an elevated landscape deck where you will be able to see the harbor. And on the ground level, there would be fountain facilities. And beneath the bridge, there would also be public space in which events could be held. There would also be steps along the promenade where people could sit and enjoy the scenery. And we would also put in trees and other shrubbery. Also, changing rooms and washroom facilities would be installed. All right, no follow-up. Next, Dr. Jang Chong Tai, 4 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to clarify the numbers in the paper. We are considering the remaining infrastructure works for developments at the former runway and South Apron. My understanding is that we're talking about the remaining infrastructure works. But if you look back at the CEDD webpage, or put aside the North Apron, the Kai Tak development on only at the development at the former runway itself, the second and third stage together already cost 5.7 billion. Today we're talking about 2.8 billion. So basically, you're talking about construction costs of 8 to 9 billion. So I want to make clear, well, we are talking about remaining infrastructure works. Well, of course, we're not talking about phase 2 and phase 3. This should actually be considered as phase 4. Am I correct? Is this the last item for funding? Because you've already received 5.7 billion. Well, you're asking for 2.8 billion now. I want to ask if this is the last time that you are going to seek funding at the FC, or there are still other phases. Well, it seems that you're asking for 2 billion each time, but then you have actually divided these up into different items. But we're talking about the same development. We're talking about over 10 billion of construction cost. Why are you chopping these up into separate items? So North Apron development together with South Apron, we're talking about total cost of over 12 billion. Now, I want to clarify. You're now asking for 2.8 billion for remaining infrastructure works. Is it the last funding item for development at the former runway? And secondly, can you show us clearly what the South Apron development will look like? I have gone through the website and looked at all the artist's impression of the Kai Tak development area. And then I came up to a total construction cost of over 10 billion for this development. So I want to know whether this 2.8 billion would be the last fund for the former runway development. Yes, your question is clear. Mr. Chan, please. Thank you. Kai Tak development is a major development. We're talking about a very large-scale development with over 300 hectares of land. with many different developments within this area. And so it would include different kinds of infrastructure works. We do need to seek funding for the different parts of infrastructure and building costs at different stages. And this is our usual procedure. This item is for the remaining infrastructure works for developments at the former runway and south apron. The parent project has already been set up at an earlier stage, but we need to seek funding for the different infrastructure works that we need to build along the phases. Well, Chairman, I just want to know whether this is the last item for funding for the former runway development. Mr. Chen, there are also other construction costs. In the paper, we have already enclosed the timetable and the estimated cost. Mr. Jeremy Tam, 4 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I have a very simple question. Or there will be a pet park which is near the station. I see that you're also building a landscape deck in the area. Can dogs also enter the landscape deck? And would there be facilities for pet usage? Because if you do not have some sort of pet toilets along the way, it would be very difficult for the pets to have to go at both ends of the walkways. We have talked to the LCSD and we would come up with a design which would be sent to the district council for approval later on. We would consult the district council. If the DC supports pets entering the landscape deck, then of course we would also put in hardware to support it. Also, that means we wouldn't know the decision till later. Do you know when the district councils would be consulted? Mr. Lau? Well, once we receive the funding, we would work on the design and we would submit it to the district council end of 2019. The decision would be made public. That means it would occur during the change of term at DC. So that means you would be bringing it to the new DC members. Am I correct? It depends on our work process. Thank you. Would any other members like to ask the first round? If not, we'll move on to the second round. Mr. Tony Tse, second round, 3 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. I want to follow up on my previous question on how to fully utilize the land, since there would be empty space underneath bridges and flyovers. Are there any restrictions on how you use the space beneath the flyovers? We touch on the topic of smart city nowadays, and in Kowloon East, we are working on smart construction smart facilities, and they are advanced technology to monitor facilities such as garbage facilities. Are we also considering smart technology during the design stage? I don't want you to come back for more money because you need to upgrade your technology after it is built. Mr. Leung? Well, let me touch on your point of smart city. Members of the public have expressed their views that there should be smart technology used in a new town and urban area development. So there would be smart water meters. For example, at the end of the development of the former runway, there would be some smart lamps with sensors. But as to the design, I would like to defer to Mr. Mack. Thank you, Chairman. If I could refer you to the first enclosure 1, you would see that the pink line is the public space. So that would be part of the public space in the future. There would be benches put there, and there would also be development in the southwestern area. And so that would link up to the promenade, and the park would also merge with the promenade area. So there would be a large area of public space.
Chairman, I'm concerned with these engineering works. So when we have intelligent street lighting, will these be considered at the same time? Will you implement these? Through the KaiTak office, we will liaise with the relevant departments. We will implement them to our best. Mr. Wu Jiwai. Well, the first issue is about bicycle-friendly arrangements. The underpasses typically don't allow for bicycles, and this involves transport policy. So I'd like you to assist. I have repeatedly asked for bicycle-friendly policies. There are no difficulties. So could you convey to the transport department that we remove these restrictions? That's the first point. And second, on the platform park, if my understanding is correct, on top of the underpass, you'll have to create a roof, and you can create a park and so on. But for carriageways, we see that typically they might not have a cover. And is it because of that? The carriageways need to have a roof to create the platform park, and that leads to increased costs. Can we have an option, since we have to create a cover in order to create the platform? So could we just work on the underpass so that it connects to the park? Would that be more economical, and we won't need to create an extra cover? So I hope you can elaborate on this arrangement. Is it feasible? Could we remove the extra cover for the carriageway and just focus on the underpass so they don't need a cover, and we can connect directly to the park? Let me respond to the first question. And the second question, okay, as Mr. Wu Jiwai said, whether bicycles can access the subway, this is a transport policy issue, and our understanding is there are safety concerns, and it is not just an engineering work issue. So we will convey the legislators' opinions to Transport Housing Bureau. Second question, about the underpass being lower than the at-grade level. The Harbourfront Commission had wanted a cover because the future park and the promenade, they want it to be connected so that there can be barrier-free access from the promenade. Do not distort my meaning. We have a carriageway next to the park. I do not object to the underpass. I want to ask, is it possible? Typically, they don't need to have a cover to create the park. So you have such a large metro park. Do you have to do it? Is it necessary? Do we have a simple response? We have a submerged level, so it won't obstruct the park users. I have 2 points, Chairman. I agree with Mr. Wu Jiwai on the bicycle-friendly issue. Sometimes the government forgets issues. The new Kai Tak development, they have to do environmental friendly transport policies. It just means that they want to build a monorail system, tens of billions monorail, but there aren't any other environmental facilities. The bicycles are most environmental friendly, but it's none of their business. So what kind of policy is that? Second, electric buses, these are environmental friendly, they have low emissions, but that's not considered. It's not relevant to this project. But most importantly, when they come for money, they seek funding under the environmental friendly label. But look at the astronomical prices of the infrastructure projects. It's close to 200 million. Since when have we become an extravagant infrastructure city? The long elevated highway. We have a world-class footbridge, and now we have. So the government is extravagant, and of course in Kowloon East, the Kaifeng want medical facilities, welfare facilities. So 200 million for a elevated footpath. Can you tell me why do you have to spend so much money, Mr. Chan? Thank you for the question. There are 2 questions. In the Kai Tak development area, we encourage transport use. In fact, in the Kai Tak development area, we have a 13-kilometer connected bicycle pedestrian footpath. Second, regarding the expenditure, the estimates were based on similar projects. It's a reasonable forecast. Well, I asked you why you spend so much money. You say it's reasonable. So you're saying, well, taxpayers' money is hard earned, but the government is trying to spend as much as they can, and you say it's a reasonable estimate. Could you tell me what is a reasonable estimate? Any further supplement, Mr. Chan? Our estimate, Chairman, is based on scientific methods. We examine the market prices. Regarding the design, the engineering design and necessity, we look at the functions and district views we come up with a design. Chairman, this is unacceptable. They are spending 200 million. This is a large sum. You need to give us a breakdown before the finance committee to tell us why you spend so much money on a very simple footpath. Mr. Fernando Chung? Well, expenditure on infrastructure is like throwing money down the drain, and the government is breaking up projects and submitting a funding application. It looks like a small sum, but when you add it up, as Mr. Jiang Chong-tai said, we're talking about more than 10 billion on infrastructure. I'm concerned that the infrastructure works are road works. It should facilitate the new acute hospital, the Kai-Tak hospital, and the children's hospital. The children's hospital will open at the end of the year. I'm concerned about the road works and how will it improve accessibility, because the children's hospital and the future Kai-Tak hospital, it's quite isolated, and we're worried that when the children's hospital is commence operations, they'll only have accommodation next year. How can we help the traffic? Because just looking at the diagram, I don't see how it improves accessibility. We're talking about sick children that need to accommodation in the hospital, so parents need to visit. How can you improve accessibility, Mr. Choi? Well, first of all, I want to clarify the works in this application. Some of the works are related to L16, L18. From Seng Chung Road, it is extended to the new acute hospital. So the children's hospital will be commencing operation very soon. And we had communicated with the hospital authority. We have item 711CL, Seng Chung Road, a single lane carriageway. It will be converted to a dual lane carriageway. It will improve traffic flow. On this point, Chairman, could you clarify when it will be completed, the expansion of the single lane to dual lane? By the middle of next year, it will be open to motorists. Regarding the traffic arrangement to the children's hospital, we have dedicated red minibuses, and we have 2 cross-harbor bus routes from Guntong to Kowloon Tong and Telford Plaza. Well, the franchise minibuses, are they barrier-free? Can wheelchair users use it? I don't have that information. For you wheelchair users, these franchise RMBs are useless. Mr. Choi says he doesn't have that information. I wanted an explanation. What works do you have to improve accessibility to the children's hospital? Well, Mr. Choi answered that. Do you have anything else? It's 711CL. That will be completed by the middle of next year. And under this application, Mr. Mack, the engineer, said there is a D3 section. It can connect the north and south hangars, and from Wang Dai Sin to Kaun City to the Children's Hospital. We have an extra road connecting them. Mr. Au Lok Kim. Well, after consolidating all legislative questions, the government departments, whether your funding application is successful or not, just now we heard about the elevated platform park, the accessibility, the roadworks, and other traffic measures. You really need to do a thorough review, especially regarding facilities. I frequent the cruise terminal, the promenade, and I'm concerned about the public open spaces. It should be open to the public. If in the Kwun Promenade, it has a lot of usage, but the usage is a lot less in the Ao Tau Kok. The water fountains in Ao Tau Kok and the Kai Tak cruise terminal. Let me answer the question. It is not barrier free. There's no way wheelchair users can access that area. You talk about buses and minibuses. First of all, there's nothing there. There's no attraction, and when I jog past the area, we have empty vehicles. So we need a better coordination in the different areas.
When the Sha-Tin Central Link starts commission, then you should do something to help the residents living nearby. You need supporting facilities. Let's say you put in a water fountain, but then nobody uses it. I would think that it is not an ideal situation. That is my first point. My second point, in relation to paragraph 4 of the paper, you said it would take 4 years for completion, and in order to alleviate traffic, you would try to ensure that it would not affect Seng Chang Road and Nam Phong Road. Well, during construction, would you actually be blocking the roads? Well, I think the first part of the question is very clear already. Perhaps we could address the second part of the question. Mr. Leung, I understand your concern on construction trucks during the period. Most of the construction material would be moved by sea, and so that would alleviate road congestion. Next question, Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you. I see there are 2 residential developments in the enclosure. I want to ask about the timetable. Are you going to complete infrastructure works before you work on the 2 plots for residential development? I would like to have a better understanding of the timetable. Mr. Chen. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chow, for your question. Yes, once we receive funding, we are going to commence construction in the beginning of next year, and in 2022, we will gradually finalize the infrastructure, and development on the apron would then commence. Well, I'm asking this question because according to experiences in other districts, this is quite a large-scale construction. And if residents have already moved in the area, then it would have a huge impact on their lives. And that is the reason why I'm asking for the timetable to see whether you would complete all the infrastructure works before you would allow the residents to move in the residential development. Because if you continue with construction after the residents have moved in, I'm sure they would have many comments about it. Well, yes. So are you working in tandem on these two developments? Well, the two plots as shown on the enclosure has not yet been sold, but we take note your comment. Thank you. Dr. Kwokaki, second round, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Well, yesterday at the we were originally going to talk about the funding for government offices and panel of development. But then the administration was not able to come up with the calculation, and instead the administration just told us that this has always been the usual manner. So if we are setting up a cost control office, then we need to really do something to minimize cost. Or have you taken this construction cost to the cost control office? This is a huge figure, and I'm sure contractors would be happy. You need to come up with clear calculations. You cannot tell us that this is very scientific. You have to give us a figure on the average cost per meter and how you came up with this calculation. I see that there are 680,000 tons of inert waste. This is a huge amount. We are talking about a huge a new development area. There shouldn't be such a large amount of inert waste. Well, on the landscape deck walkway, this is a pedestrian walkway connecting to Kowloon Bay and the new development area. It is pretty much the same as any other pedestrian walkway. We have a drawn reference from other walkways. It's about $1,100 per square meters for the walkways in the vicinity, and our price is $1,200 per square meter, so it is a little bit more expensive. You asked about the construction waste because we need to have a underpass, and therefore we would need to dig out all the waste, and then we are going to transport it out via sea. Well, so what has the cost control office done in terms of controlling cost? Well, yes, we have sought advice from the cost control office and made adjustments. So what was the original figure? Even more astronomical? We have made a downward adjustment of a few percent. Well, I want to see a more detailed paper next time on this. Dr. Fernando Chung, 3 minutes, second round. Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit worried. We see very luxurious, high-cost pedestrian walkways. in future, when the children's hospital is completed, family members would be visiting the hospital on a frequent basis. I'm not sure how you prioritize the use of resources. On one hand, we see the large infrastructure works all along the way connecting from Kowloon East to the cruise terminal. We've spent billions of dollars on that. The Children's Hospital is also a large-scale construction, but then there seems to be a lack of transportation support. I think the design is very strange. I don't understand why there is a need for a luxurious public open space, yet you do not invest in resources to convenient family members visiting the children's hospital. There are going to be 2 large hospitals in the area. Should you consider prioritizing transportation support and arrangement for the hospitals instead of just focusing on the commercial areas? Actually, the Kai Tak Development Office will work with the Transport Department on this, and we will follow up with bus routes. We do not have enough roads. It has nothing to do with bus routes. There are not enough roads. The hospital is in the south. You need to find a way to get to the north. Well, I think the question is very clear. Can you give us an elaboration? Well, yes, we are now expanding the area around the Hong Kong Children's Hospital, which would be completed at the end of 2019. Mr. Ho Kai Ming, second round, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm also very concerned, same as Dr. Fernando Chang, on the roads leading to the Hong Kong Children's Hospital and the new acute hospital. There is now only one road leading to the Children's Hospital and the new acute hospital, which is a road right next to the promenade. You all know that if you are heading towards that road, it's congested all the area around. Why do you have to build a D3? Because if you do not build the road D3, then you will not be able to enter it from To Kwa Wan. So there is a need to build this proposed road D3 as soon as possible. It would help us to lead to the Children's Hospital and the new acute hospital, and would also provide another way to the cruise terminal. If we do not support this item today, then there would be major traffic congestion. With this road, then and with the Central Kowloon route, then we'll be able to link up all this to Yau Chim Wong. But now, the only district lacking is Wong Tai Sin. There is no connection to Wong Tai Sin. Why do you have to go roundabout before reaching Wong Tai Sin? I hope that there is more convenient transportation to the Children's Hospital and new acute hospital. I hope that those living in the Kowloon Central Cluster and the West Kowloon Cluster will be able to go to these 2 hospitals very easily. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Ho Kai Ming has been very clear about the necessity of Road D3. Next, Mr. Chu Hoi Dick, 4 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. I see there are two parts in relation to pedestrians. One is the landscape deck with a sub-item of 200 million. And also an area near above road D3. I don't really see in the sub-item where the figure lies. Can you elaborate on this point? In the paper, I also see 3.16 million on dumping construction waste, and I don't see this figure in the breakdown of the proposed works. The cost of the landscape deck is already included in the road works. But if you're asking about the deck itself, it costs around 120 million. And the dumping of the construction waste will be the responsibility of the contractors, and therefore it is put in the miscellaneous items.
I'd like to ask, in paragraph 3A5, is that the landscape deck? Is that the description for the landscaped deck? The 120 million? Page 2, paragraph 3A5. Chairman. It describes a 380-meter long landscape deck. Some of it is above grade level. It connects to the promenade. The elevated section is about 200 meters, and the 120 million, it just refers to the 200-meter elevated section. So 200 meters, it's 11 meters wide, and that costs 120 million. And what about the remaining 180 meters? The 180 meters, we have a platform on top of a subway underground pass. So we just have some vegetation on top of the underground pass, on top of the tunnel. Okay. When I look at the cost, so set aside Dr. Kokake's comments on the landscape section. This is an elevated section. It's 200 meters and 11 meters wide, and the cost is 120 million. So compared to the Yunlong 1.7 billion bridge, it's cheaper. It's 11 meters wide. The Yunlong one is only 6 meters wide. Could you clarify? Is the CEDD more efficient than the Highways Department? Well, the engineering difficulties, the design, the environment, the site is Mr. Leung. Could you respond? As the Secretary said, the design has to consider the site constraints. We also make reference to recent market prices. Mr. Eddie Chu, your second round. So colleagues might wish to follow up in the Finance Committee. First of all, I see the 3 enclosures. They have been referred to by colleagues. It's very simple. It's so simple that I can't make sense out of it. I had to search the internet and look at the artist's impression to get a better understanding. So I hope the government can take these 3 items. They can take a future impression to facilitate our understanding. The officials said they would provide more information after the meeting. And second, I'd like the government to give us a breakdown on the landscape decks. I mentioned in paragraph 12, the 1.3 billion is added all up. They can respond in writing. They can respond in writing to Mr. Eddie Chu's question. Mr. Wu Ji-wai. I want to ask, the elevated landscape deck, is it a necessary item? Because if you look at your enclosure 2 or 3, at the end it's a cul-de-sac. There isn't any further connection. Well, if that's the case, then this elevated landscape deck is just a showpiece. Is it possible to remove the elevated landscape deck and just retain the part on top of the tunnel? Wouldn't that be more cost effective? Could you illustrate what the necessity of this elevated landscape deck is? Well, if Mr. Wu is referring to enclosure 3, sheet 303, the red part, the landscaped elevated deck, as we said just now, the function, it's a footbridge. Look at the diagram. We have some blue lines, some blue diagonal lines. Chairman, I think Mr. Wu is referring to page 2. There's an extension, and it's a cul-de-sac. Could you please continue? We had already answered. It looks broken in the diagram. At the runway, they are building an elevated deck, and we are connecting to that, even though it's not indicated in the diagram. But it doesn't stop there. It extends to the whole runway. So this elevated landscape deck, as we said just now, it has an important role in the pedestrian system. Could you provide the supplementary information? Ms. Claudia Moe? Well, now this is strange. If you just look at the diagram, it is a cul-de-sac, but it's not. They are still building. Then you really need to clear up the picture. You should not respond only when asked. And just now when Mr. Wu Ji-wai asked, you misunderstood his question. That is not ideal. I'd also like to remind the pro-government camp, it is very normal for us to ask questions. We need to monitor the government's operations, especially its expenditure in public works. We're not conducting a show. You shouldn't tell us to not ask so many questions. Miss Claudia Moe, I don't know what you're referring to. Nobody said, I also did not refer to anybody. I'm just quoting. You just raised your question. Please raise your question. So everybody can express their views. I still don't understand the official's response. The elevated landscape deck, you have not answered. It sounds like a vanity project. What is the purpose of the project? You have repeated previous questions by Mr. Leung. Well, if you look at the enclosure, there are some words here. It says connection to future item. It says connect to future road D3A being constructed under separate project. It is a project being built separately. I'm asking you what is the meaning of this. I'm not asking you the engineering details. Ms. Mo says is asking a fundamental question. What is the meaning of this project? Thank you, Chairman. Let me clarify. The runway, you can see there's a roundabout to the south of the roundabout. That is the old runway. In the future, there will be some developments, and currently we already have a project undergoing. We are widening Sing Fong Road, and on top of Sing Fong Road there will be a landscape deck, and that will allow the pedestrians to access the Metro Park. So in order to improve accessibility, the landscape deck on top of the runway, after going to the roundabout, it will connect to the proposed elevated deck so that there can be a continuity between the two, and it will allow residents and pedestrians to access the promenade, and they can use the open space. Well, if it's for connection, then why do you need to emphasize that it's a landscape deck? Why do you make it sound like a tourist attraction? Is it an observation platform? But I'm worried that nobody will use it because it's just a connection. It's just a traffic consideration. So then you shouldn't make exaggerated claims and say that it's an observation deck. Well, if we have improvement to the environment, or if we make it more convenient or more appealing, well, as Chairman said, we are providing some landscape facilities such that the space can be more appropriate and appealing, and it also dovetails with our Kai-Tak development. Mr. Edichu? Well, I have an opinion, a suggestion. The landscape deck, if you look at the OZP, it has a specific planning use. There are different components. They have the wastewater management plant, and there's the cruise terminal section. Well, why do we have our colleagues question? Because the landscape deck, if it's an extension, then it should be submitted as an independent project so that we understand the costs and we can discuss it independently, that we can discuss its necessity, the alignment. But now they have used the town planning board procedure, and they've almost made up the decision for us. And when you submit it to the PWSC, you are breaking up the projects and you are combining it with the roadworks. So the total figure leads to a lot of misunderstanding. We don't understand what the elevated landscape deck is. So could you review your practice? So you are sticking the 124 million in the overall $1 billion budget. Well, Mr. Edichi has asked for a more detailed breakdown of the costs, and the officials said they would respond in writing. So we do need to build these roadworks in phases. So even though it's a continuous extension, but they will be built in phases. So when we have better accessibility and we have more vegetation and landscape facilities, so as a road user or a resident, that let's hear me out. In other panels, this has been mentioned many times. So if PWSC were to backtrack, I think it's unnecessary. What have they described? Well, you have an elevated landscape. It's 1,400 meters, and now they're breaking it up into different parts. And they're seeking funding on separate occasions. Well, time's up. I said that regarding the Kai-Tak connection, adding these elements, that has been discussed thoroughly in other panels and venues. Mr. Kong Jun-yu.
多謝主席。
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to follow up on the previous question. Maybe the administration can help clarify because it is not very clear in the paper. So that is why members are a bit confused that you're talking about a landscape deck of around 1,000 meters long. And so you said a part of it is being built right now. So have you divided those into different phases? Is this the last phase? Can you try to tell us verbally? I think a paper will be supplemented next time, but would you have any oral explanation right now? Mr. Leung? Well, we would supplement you with the information after the meeting. The landscape deck has already been put in the outline zoning plan, and there actually is a need in the construction. I would supplement with additional information afterwards. Well, any follow-up question? Well, Chairman, my question is very simple. I think that we are all trying to grasp a better understanding of the item. I see from the paper that this is actually an area near the south apron. So towards the south, it would lead you to the cruise terminal. This part right in the middle, I'm trying to ask a very simple question. This part, this so-called landscape deck, also it's sort of like an adjoining area. I just want to know whether you have separated these into different items before. This is a 1,400 square meter. So next year we'll be working on the 1,000 meter area. The other part is the item we're talking about today, the 380 meters long. So if you add in the 380 meters to the previous 1,000 meters, so that is the entire landscape deck. Well, I can follow up, Chairman. I'm sorry. Well, why do you have to divide it into two separate items? Because the landscape deck is actually for pedestrian use. So it has to be built together with the roads. We cannot just complete road construction before working on the landscape deck. It has to be constructed in tandem. We're gradually bringing up items in different phases because we need many roads and carriageways in this. So, and under this item 702CL, we are working on the remaining 380 meters long landscape deck. So altogether is 1,400 meters. You have already built 900 to 1,000 meters, and the remaining area is 380 meters long. So that means you have already started construction, and so you must continue with the construction. Have you considered that in the event that you are not able to receive funding, then that means you will not be able to complete the deck? Well, the previous FC is led by Mr. Chan Mao-po. I'm only heading PWSC here, but I think your concern is very clear. So this is actually not a new item. It has already been previously approved. Mr. Gary Fan, second round, 3 minutes. I'm also concerned with my previous question on the public open space that costs about 400 million. When I read the paper, I also read the proposals given to the district councils. There are some artist impression or sections of artist impression that are not submitted to us. Can you also submit it to LegCo? And can you also show us the breakdown of the 400 million of the public open space? I have gone through all the enclosures, and I still can't find this water fountain mentioned by the administration. I don't even know where this fountain would be located. So how can we be clear about the entire plan? Can this information be submitted to us later on? Well, I'm sure that can be done. Mr. Leung? Yes, it can be supplemented later. Well, you should actually have given this to us in advance so that we'll be able to more effectively review the proposal and not to raise these concerns during our discussions. Thank you for your comments. The Kai Tak development is huge. Therefore, there are many new proposals. If you look at enclosure 3, you'll be able to see some of the category A developments. Well, members have requested for extra information today. Please submit it to us as soon as possible. Dr. Kwokaki, 2 minutes. Third round. Well, I don't need 2 minutes, Chairman. My request is very simple. I've asked about the cost control, cost estimate, and whether the administration has learned from experience and to in overspending. Well, we see these items being brought up in pieces. I see in your enclosure 3 the items such as Children's Hospital that of course are supported by us, but you're talking about funding for other works. I think you should submit to us a paper on the cost breakdown, detailed information on estimated expenses, so that it would help us understand better the item. Otherwise, you never give us the answer when we don't ask for it. Well, I don't think you are trying to deceive us on purpose. I know that many works have already been commenced, and therefore there is no going back. Like the East Metropolis, you started off with the feasibility study and there is no going back. I hope that you would be frank with us and tell us about the breakdown in a detailed manner. Well, I think that there would be follow-up, and the panel on development also talked about it yesterday. Mr. Ao Nok Kim, I have a very brief question. Well, I'm sorry. I have to interrupt. Our meeting should end at 10:30. Well, since we have almost asked all the questions, I suggest that we bring this item to a vote, which means that we'll need to extend the meeting by less than 15 minutes, and we're not going to begin a new item after voting. And then we will also go back to item 1 on late application afterwards. Mr. Ao Nok Kim. Well, I've discussed the landscape deck with Mr. Chu Hoi Dik, and I see that, if you're trying to go up to the landscape deck in the middle, it's not easy. Well, it's easy to go at the end of the corridor, but then if you're walking at ground level, you want to go up, it's not easy. There's no elevator, no stairs towards the middle part, and so people will not be able to go up to this elevated landscape deck if they are walking at ground level. The landscape deck is being built at the end of the runway, and there would be elevators and stairs along the way to convenient the public to go up to the landscape deck. And stairs and elevators are already being built at the ends of the runway. Well, in the current information that I have on hand, I do not see any signs of elevators. So I am really not sure whether this is satisfactory. Well, if this has already been explained, any follow-up? Well, you're talking about 200 meters at height. I just want to supplement that the elevators have already been submitted in Head 711. We have also included elevators in the public open space cost. Mr. Kwong Jun-yu, second round, 3 minutes. Thank you. I'd like to ask about a technical question. Well, right now you have a landscape deck, and it's maybe similar to the area near Tuen Mun Hospital to connect people towards the road. Yesterday, I met with the LCSD on people and pets using the same area. I think we have discussed before that pets should be allowed to enter certain areas near the children's hospital because pets can also help with therapy. I have one question. Let's say this item is approved today. Aside from inclusive use for both pets and people, I think it is also beneficial to hospital patients. Well, it might be too early to say anything about it, but I heard yesterday that there is a first inclusive park under LCSD. I want to ask whether this space would also be managed by the LCSD. Thank you. Mr. Leung, thank you, Chairman. I remember members asking the same question before. The public open space is managed by the LCSD. As to whether pets would be permitted to enter, we would bring our design back to the District Council for consultation. With the approval of the DCs, the LCSD would allow pets to enter and to put in supporting hardware. Well, what I'm saying is that I try to use the term animals and pets here. Well, you only need a very small gate for pets. This is very close to a hospital facility. If we believe that animal doctors can help young patients, I hope that you will try to see whether there is such a possibility of such an inclusive park. Mr. Chen Chi-chun, second round, 3 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. Well, originally, I didn't want to ask my question. I was going to wait for the supplementary information. But then it seems that I don't have this luxury because we still lack a lot of information that can help us vote on the item, because many things are not clear right now. I hope that the government will provide us with more detailed papers in the future. Well, I know that you are going to vote on the item today, so maybe I should ask my question even though I know it may not be answered. This is really confusing. I would like to follow up with enclosure 1 section of the artist's impression B. Is that the landscape deck? The answer is no. Now I'd like to follow up with another question. This flyover a must? Why do you have to build this right in the middle of the road? How far is it from the ground and how wide is this?
And what is the cost of this if you look at it as a isolated project, and how, if we don't support it, how will it affect the traffic? Mr. Mack? Let me explain. The cross-section in the enclosure, that is the 200-meter elevated deck, and the function is to connect the promenade and the cruise terminal. We want to connect to create a foot connection, a footpath connection. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I heard colleagues saying that parts of it exist. You have applied funding to build parts, different sections, and you are just seeking money to complete the connection. Ms. Claudia Mo, I'd like to remind officials, if the CE Carrie Lam can say that animals are not pets, if we want to deal with animal welfare, well, I understand that you're only technocrats, but all your projects are to serve the community. You are serving the community, society, and when we asked whether we can accommodate an animal park, you said you'll go back and look at it. But previously you had not considered these type of suggestions. So there's no room for consideration. So this type of mentality is not ideal. This is similar to the situation we have right now. The chairman said you will provide information after the meeting. We don't have the information, and you're asking us to vote. And when it goes to the FC, you'll say that there has been thorough discussion at the PWSC, and they have supplementary documents. This is not ideal. This elevated landscape deck, it's very large scale, it's very expensive, and so set aside the issue about whether we can, whether animals can use it. We can't even confirm how the humans can use this bridge. Are you making it photography friendly? Can we stop and take pictures? Do you have any supplement, Mr. Chan? As we said just now, we will submit further information, and on top of the landscape deck, the pedestrians, whether they can take pictures, they do have the freedom to do that. Well, I have a personal impression that the landscape deck, that it's a vanity project. How will you respond to that comment? It's just a showpiece. Well, we had consulted the district councils. The project is based on functionality. It is also beneficial to the environment. Mr. Eddie Chu? Thank you, Chairman. Looking at 711 CL in paragraph 3A3, it refers to 1.4 kilometers and a landscape deck not less than 11 meters wide. So we're adding another 380 to the 1.4 kilometers. It's not 380 meters within the 1.4 kilometers. Mr. Mack? It's separate, Chairman. The 711 and this are separate sections. Well, looking at this section, there is a different ingress, and then there's a at grade level, there's a green area. What is that green area, Mr. Mack? Just now I had answered the same question. That is, in between the two tunnels there's a ventilation. We don't need a mechanical ventilation. It's an environmental consideration. Well, let's put the item to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your hand. That was a call for a division bell. Let's ring for 5 minutes.
可能處理到許智峰。
We might be able to deal with Mr. Hui Jifeng's application, or might not be able to deal with Mr. Hui Jifeng's late application. Mr. Hui Jifeng cannot vote on this item. We do have some time to deal with your application to the PWSC. Let's put it to the vote before I announce the deadline. Please verify your vote. We'll now stop voting and display the results. 32 in attendance, 25 for, 1 against, and 5 abstentions. We endorse it. Next, do we have a call for separate voting at the FC? Dr. Kokake has asked for that. Mr. Hui Jifeng wishes to join the PWSC. Previously, he missed the deadline. He has a letter indicating his reasons for joining the PWSC, and some colleague wished to ask Mr. Hui questions. Mr. Hui did not explain why he did not meet the deadline. So we'd like to hear your explanation. Thank you for taking time to deal with it. So there was a time conflict with my other arrangements, but when I was able to reschedule my obligations, I had missed the deadline. Well, Mr. Hui said that he thought he could not meet the meeting dates, and now he has rearranged his schedule. Do we have any questions? Mr. Jie Wai-chun. So even if we go past 10:45, we'll conclude this item. Chairman, I heard the explanation that Mr. Hui might have some scheduling conflicts. Well, his participation in other panels, does that mean the PWSC, relatively speaking, is of a lower importance to other panels? So, Mr. Hui, well, all the panels are important. It's just that there was a scheduling conflict. Any other questions? So do we agree in allowing Mr. Hui to participate? Can we call for a division bell? Let's ring. I said just now that we might exceed 10:45. If we need to ring the bell, we'll ring the bell. Well, since there has been a request, I'll have to, unless there wasn't a call for a division bell. So if we have a division bell, we'll have to ring the bell. It will go past 10:45, but that's not a deadline, as long as we all agree. We agree. Can we vote on the next occasion, Chairman? So since we have an objection, if it exceeds 10:45, we still need an agreement. Mr. Tan Ji-chun, it's clear we have an objection, so we have to wait till the next occasion. 7th of November, 8:30. The first item will be to deal with Mr. Hoi's application. Thank you. If Mr. Hoi wishes to provide a written explanation, we welcome you to do so. Okay, meeting adjourned.